Thank you for coming out this afternoon. Wanted to provide you with a recap of what occurred last night during the officer-involved shooting, as well as some information that we have developed since that shooting, primarily regarding statements from the ex-girlfriend at the residence, as well as some of the information we've been able to put together regarding the suspect in this case. First off, the deceased individual who's a suspect in this case is a Lonnie Matthew Graham, the G-R-A-H-A-M. He's a Hispanic male, 28 years of age, with a DOB of 4/24 of 81. And his booking photo, previous booking photo, is listed here on the easel. Graham was an absconding parolee. He was a validated Bulldog Gang member, and he was being sought on numerous felony charges, and most notably for being an ex-felon in possession of a firearm. That incident occurred on September 17th, shortly before 6 p.m. Officers assigned to the Northeast District Crime Suppression Team were patrolling in the area of Blackstone and Gettysburg when they saw a vehicle parked in the Motel 6 parking lot. As they drove by, they looked back and saw one of the individuals in the vehicle get out of that car. It was Lonnie Graham, and they recognized him based on the tattoos on his face at that time. As they turned around to make contact, Graham ran from the officers, and at one point discarded a firearm into a nearby bush while he was being pursued. That information had been relayed to us by at least one citizen who had witnessed him running and discarding an item into the bush. That discarded, stolen 9mm handgun was in fact recovered by our officers. Graham was placed onto our daily crime bulletin, meaning that is distributed to all of our officers to look for this individual. At that time, he was considered to be armed and dangerous, and not only based on the information we had as a result of him discarding a firearm, but also the information that was on the warrant issued by state parole said that he was to be considered armed and dangerous. And again, he was wanted for being a parolee at large. He had absconded, and in fact that warrant was issued in April of 2009. He was considered to be a high-risk parolee, a gang parolee, and as a result of that, state parole had placed a GPS monitor on him. He had cut that monitor off sometime prior to April when the warrant was issued for his arrest. On September 22nd, last night, about 11:15 p.m., members of our Bulldog tactical team, who were very familiar with Graham, received information that Graham was possibly in a residence in the 1300 block of North Calaveras. The officers approached the location on foot. They monitored the residence for about 15 to 20 minutes when they did see Graham come out of the back door of the residence and then go back inside of the house a short time later. They also saw a female, which was later determined to be Graham's ex-girlfriend, come out of the house, get into a vehicle as if she was preparing to leave. The officers were able to detain her and in fact removed her from that location out to the street, out of harm's way. Just a short time later, what the officers saw was Graham hurriedly exit the back door of the residence, and it was at that time that the officers confronted Graham, and the officers described Graham as having his hands down in front of him, and they saw in his right hand what they described as a silver or shiny object, and with his left hand very close by. The officers told Graham to place his hands up, and it was at that time that Graham turned away from the officers, concealing what he was holding, while continuing to look over his shoulder at the officers. The officers again yelled at him to drop the object, and Graham refused to do so. As Graham took a step, the officers felt at that point in time he was preparing to turn on them, felt that their lives were in danger, that he was in fact armed with a firearm as he had been during the previous encounter with law enforcement a week before, and both officers fired at the suspect, Graham, striking him several times, and he was ultimately pronounced deceased at the scene by EMS, and that was after attempts were made to keep him alive by the officers through first aid. Some information that we have been able to develop in interviewing with the ex-girlfriend last night. She told detectives that Graham had told her earlier in the evening that police were kicking down doors to locate him, that the walls were closing in, and told one of our detectives that it's about time for him to die. And the ex-girlfriend also told detectives that she felt that Graham was crazy and that he always had a firearm in his possession, which is consistent with the information that we had gathered as well. Lonnie Graham belonged to the Bulldog Gang, but it was one of the more violent sects of the Bulldog Gang, who call themselves Forever Riding Dirty. They have a desire to establish themselves as being one of the most violent Bulldog gangs, in the fact that they thrive on intimidating other people and are armed and always considered to be dangerous. They also have a belief that other Bulldog sects are weaker than they are, and that obviously they have vowed to not be eliminated, as was part of our plan to eliminate the Bulldog Gang. Graham had extensive previous contact with our agency, with the Bulldog Tactical Team, Magic investigators, as well as the Magic Tactical Team. In fact, they had arrested him 3 times in the last year for parole violation. Our detectives first became aware of Lonnie Graham about 18 months ago as part of a long-term investigation that involved a wiretap. It was during that wiretap that Graham's name first was mentioned over phone conversations, and as it was in response to a narcotics investigation, and it was determined at that point that Graham was believed to be an enforcer for narcotics dealers. We did have another prior call in July regarding Lonnie Graham. It was the ex-girlfriend who had called the police department at that time. She told the dispatcher that Graham was attempting to break into her house, and that she feared that she was going to be shot by him. And this is a very tragic case. Anytime someone loses their life, anytime an officer has to use a deadly force, it is a tragic case. We did not find a weapon or a handgun or any type of weapon nearby or in the possession of Lonnie Graham. The officers did believe that he was possessing a firearm based on the prior contact that officers had, and just their knowledge that this individual was violent and was considered to be armed and dangerous. That, combined with the movements that he made and his refusal to obey the officers' commands, created a state of mind in those 2 officers that caused them to be fearful for their life. And again, it's unfortunate that the officers used deadly force or had to use deadly force, and it's unfortunate that someone's life was taken. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions.